Prelude chapter. Nesta fights against being submerged into the cauldron by the King of Hybern, who has already turned her sister Elaine into a fairy. Despite Cassian's futile attempts to help, Nesta is overpowered and plunged into the icy, otherworldly water. As she sinks, she experiences the agony of transformation, her human form burning away to be replaced by immortal power. Vowing revenge, she harnesses the cauldron's energy, tearing through the darkness with fierce determination. Consumed by her newfound strength, Nesta becomes entwined with the cauldron, radiating power like a newborn star. In Chapter 1, Cassian reluctantly visits Nesta Archeron in her rundown apartment after Feyre summons her to their new riverfront estate. Nesta, still grappling with the aftermath of war and her new Fey powers, has spent the night drinking and bedding a stranger. Cassian confronts her, urging her to clean up for Feyre's gathering. Nesta's bitter resentment towards her family, particularly Feyre and Rhysand, is palpable as she arrives at the luxurious estate. Feyre, Rhysand and Amren await her in a study, prompting tension and unresolved conflicts between Nesta and her sisters. In Chapter 2, tensions escalate as Nesta confronts her forced relocation to the House of Wind. Feyre and Rhys, along with Amren, assert that Nesta must train with Cassian each morning and work in the library each afternoon. Nesta vehemently resists, feeling betrayed and cornered. Feyre reveals that Nesta's apartment is being packed up, pushing Nesta to choose between complying with their terms or being banished back to the human lands. The chapter ends with Nesta's fury unleashed, rejecting Feyre's authority, but left with few options as the reality of her situation sinks in. In Chapter 3 of the story delves into Cassian's meeting with Rhysand in the High Lord's study. Rhysand discusses Cassian's success in managing the Illyrians after a recent conflict and proposes larger responsibilities for him. This includes overseeing Nesta, who possesses latent powers that concern Rhysand. Cassian reluctantly accepts the task amidst tensions between Nesta and Feyre, who arranges for Nesta to stay at the House of Wind. The chapter ends with Nesta settling into her old room, grappling with past traumas and the weight of her new responsibilities. In Chapter 4, Cassian meets Mor at a riverfront cafe. They discuss Valahan's refusal to sign a treaty, fearing human Queen's military activities. Cassian is tasked with investigating the Queens while Mor deals with Valahan. They consider involving Vassa for insight. Meanwhile, Nesta wakes in Valaris, haunted by memories of her impoverished past and a toxic relationship. Cassian, back at the House of Wind, contemplates the upcoming challenges involving Nesta and their precarious situation with potential threats looming. In Chapter 5 begins with Nesta refusing breakfast at the House of Wind, stubbornly resisting Cassian's attempts to make her eat for energy. Their tense exchange reveals Nesta's grief over her father's death and Cassian's efforts to train her despite her reluctance. They travel to Windhaven, where Nesta faces hostility from the Illyrians. Cassian intervenes, asserting Nesta's training rights, but facing opposition from a male named Devlin. Despite the tension, Cassian directs Nesta to a training area where she defiantly sits out, prompting a silent but charged confrontation between them. The chapter highlights their complex dynamic and Nesta's internal struggle as she resists Cassian's influence. In Chapter 6 unfolds with Nesta observing Cassian's graceful combat skills, captivated despite her efforts to resist. Morrigan interrupts, noting Cassian's prowess and sharing disapproval of Nesta's apparent detachment. Later, Nesta reluctantly returns to the library, confronting memories and the enigmatic Clotho, who assigns her a dusty task. Despite initial friction, Clotho subtly compliments Nesta, invoking Feyre's praise. Feeling isolated, Nesta dines alone, feeling the house's silent reproach. She rejects the meal's provision and resolves to fend for herself, underscored by her ongoing struggle with inner turmoil and external perceptions. In Chapter 7, Cassian arrives at Durian, Vassa and Lucien's manor, which shows signs of war damage. He meets with Lucien and learns Eris is also present. They discuss Eris's missing soldiers, suspected to be abducted by humans. Vassa suggests Brialyn, a powerful but aged queen, might be involved, possibly manipulated by Koschei, an ancient sorcerer. Eris reveals his father's alliance with Brialyn, alarming Cassian. Despite tensions, they agree to cooperate against common threats. Eris proposes an alliance, seeking Cassian's aid against his father. Cassian reluctantly agrees, setting the stage for complex political maneuvering and potential conflict ahead. In Chapter 8, Nesta, determined to find solace in the city, descends a treacherous stairwell of 10,000 steps from the house on the mountain. Struggling with physical and emotional exhaustion, she reaches the bottom only to confront Cassian, tasked with monitoring Eris amidst escalating tensions. Despite their confrontational banter, Cassian senses Nesta's vulnerability after her grueling climb. The next morning, Nesta's soreness is palpable, leading to further friction between her and Cassian during breakfast. Later, at a training session, Cassian challenges Nesta, but she remains stubborn and distant. As they part ways, Cassian worries about leaving Nesta alone and unsettled in the house. In Chapter 9, Nesta seeks warmer clothes at a shop and meets Emery, a female with scarred wings who empathizes with her. Emery offers to help despite Nesta's lack of funds, aware of her past as a hero and her current isolation. Back at the House of Wind, Nesta encounters Gwyneth Badara, an acolyte who challenges her to shelve books and offers unexpected kindness. Despite initial friction, Nesta begins to respect Gwyn's resilience. Later, Nesta reflects on her role in the library and reluctantly accepts the house's provisions, finding a moment of quiet gratitude amid her inner turmoil. In Chapter 10, Nesta indulges in a lavish meal at the house's insistence, confronted by Cassian, who questions her unusual behaviour. They banter, and Cassian leaves her with a half-eaten cake after a tense exchange. Later, Nesta reads a romance novel and experiences unsettling dreams of her father and her powers. She wakes to find herself using magic involuntarily. Disturbed, she descends the house's stairs, experiencing a harrowing fall but saving herself with magic, leaving a mysterious handprint. Cassian discovers her bruises and mocks her, prompting tension between them. Despite their strained interaction, Cassian tentatively offers his hand in reconciliation, but Nesta refuses, feeling undeserving. In Chapter 11, Nesta struggles with accessing the private library after a long day of tedious work shelving books, feeling increasingly isolated and frustrated. At dinner, she encounters Cassian and Azriel, where tensions rise as they discuss Azriel's upcoming mission and Nesta's reluctance to train. Cassian confronts Nesta about her attitude, leading to a heated argument where harsh words are exchanged. Feeling misunderstood and defensive, Nesta retreats to the library, grappling with her inner turmoil and past resentments. Meanwhile, Cassian reflects on his failed attempts to connect with Nesta and seeks advice from Feyre, revealing the complexities of their strained relationship amidst looming external threats and personal challenges. In Chapter 12 begins with Nesta expressing frustration about not going to Windhaven as planned, but Cassian insists they train at the House of Wind due to Morrigan's absence and Rhys and Feyre's busyness. Cassian offers Nesta a bargain, 1 hour of training in exchange for a favour of her choosing. Reluctantly, she agrees. They start with basic exercises focusing on balance and body control, incorporating breathing techniques. Despite initial reluctance and struggles, Nesta perseveres through the exercises with Cassian's guidance. By the end, they establish a tentative understanding, and Nesta reveals she doesn't hate Cassian, leaving him with a surprising admission as she leaves for the library. In Chapter 13, Nesta struggles with physical exhaustion as she works tirelessly in the library, handling books and enduring soreness from her exercises. Gwyn, another priestess, interrupts her solitary work, seeking help to locate a missing book crucial to her work for the demanding Merrill. Nesta, despite her disdain for Merrill, aids Gwyn by stealthily swapping books in Merrill's office, narrowly avoiding detection. Grateful, Gwyn shares insights into Merrill's research on Valkyries and the complexities of their history. Afterward, Nesta finds solace in a rare moment of self-care, indulging in a hot meal and bath before collapsing into much-needed sleep. In Chapter 14, Cassian waits anxiously for Nesta, who arrives late and sore for their training session. Despite initial discomfort, Cassian guides Nesta through rigorous exercises to alleviate her muscle soreness. Later, Cassian meets with Rhys and Eris in the Spring Court orchard. Eris suggests eliminating the human queens to prevent war, but Cassian and Rhys reject the idea due to its potential consequences. Eris hints at delays in his father's plans and leaves, prompting Cassian's unease and Rhys's contemplation about future conflicts. Meanwhile, Nesta deals with her own internal struggles and finds solace in the house's unexpected gestures of kindness. In Chapter 15, Nesta ventures to the 7th level of the library, a place filled with unsettling darkness. While on level 6, she contemplates the depths below, where books and mysteries dwell. She is haunted by recent events, including the deaths of Hybern's twin ravens and the release of Bryaxis, the embodiment of fear. Gwyn interrupts her reverie, concerned about the darkness that seems to follow them. They discuss an ancient darkness lingering in the library, possibly drawn to Nesta due to her cauldron-made origins. The chapter explores Nesta's uneasy relationship with her newfound powers and her ongoing training with Cassian, delving into his own troubled past and fearsome encounters. In Chapter 16, Cassian wakes up restless after a night of intense desire for Nesta, whom he had openly discussed his intentions with the previous evening. At breakfast, tension hangs between them, exacerbated by Nesta's embarrassed reaction to Cassian's question about the romance novel she's reading. Determined to channel their energy elsewhere, they engage in rigorous training. Cassian pushes Nesta through challenging exercises, revealing details about Illyrian culture, including the brutal blood rite ritual that defines warrior status. Despite their strained interactions, Nesta proposes training for non-Illyrian females, sparking a tentative connection between them as they contemplate broader implications beyond their personal dynamics. In Chapter 17 centres on Nesta's initiative to train priestesses in combat at the House of Wind. She proposes the idea to Clotho, who cautiously agrees, but no one signs up initially. Nesta persists, training rigorously with Cassian, focusing on physical fitness and combat techniques. Despite her efforts, tensions rise when Nesta confronts Elaine about their past and their father's death, leading to a heated argument. Elaine leaves, distraught, prompting Cassian to confront Nesta about the altercation, escalating into a clash of emotions between them. In Chapter 18, Nesta descends a seemingly endless stairwell, grappling with physical and emotional exhaustion. She reaches 1003 steps before collapsing, where Cassian finds her. They discuss her struggles with training and her bitterness towards her family's legacy. Cassian reveals his own painful past and offers understanding, but their conversation escalates into a heated exchange. Nesta, overwhelmed, kisses Cassian impulsively, sparking tension between them. The chapter highlights Nesta's inner turmoil and her complex relationship with Cassian, hinting at deeper emotional layers yet to be explored. In Chapter 19, Nesta and Cassian share a heated encounter in a hallway, where their passionate kiss escalates into a physical encounter against a wall. Despite the intensity, Nesta abruptly ends it, leaving Cassian confused and embarrassed. The next morning, Cassian is unsettled and distracted, especially when faced with Asriel's knowing gaze and questions about their readiness for a meeting at the river house. Cassian is preoccupied by his feelings of inadequacy and the lingering effects of their encounter, while Asriel hints at deeper concerns he's grappling with. Their interactions hint at underlying tensions and personal struggles affecting both characters. In Chapter 20, Nesta and Cassian return to Valaris, tense and distant after a night of longing and tension. They arrive at the river house for a meeting with Rhysand, Fair, Asriel, and Amren. Asriel reports on Queen Briallin's plans to gather armies and seeks the Dread Trove to find the cauldron. The trove consists of objects like the mask, harp, and crown, each with potent abilities. Briallin's alliance with Beren and influence from the Death Lord Koschei complicates matters. Nesta's connection to the cauldron and the trove is discussed, revealing a dark prophecy and Elaine's unexpected involvement. Their next moves involve strategy and secrecy, amidst looming war threats. In Chapter 21, tensions rise between Nesta and Elaine over the decision to seek out the cauldron. Elaine asserts her autonomy despite Nesta's objections, leading to a heated exchange where Nesta's harsh words deeply wound Elaine. Meanwhile, Fair reveals she's pregnant, prompting joyous reactions from everyone except Nesta, who feels disconnected and burdened by familial expectations. Despite her reservations, Nesta reluctantly agrees to help locate the trove, a dangerous artifact linked to the cauldron. The chapter closes with Fair sharing the news that she's expecting a boy, a moment of fragile connection between the sisters amidst lingering conflicts and uncertainties. In Chapter 22, Cassian and Asriel discuss Nesta's ability to find the trove while they sit by the fire, worries about Nesta's safety, but respects her decision to take risks for Elaine's sake. They agree to let Nesta exhaust her options before pushing her towards scrying. Later, Cassian visits Nesta in her room, finding her reading in bed. He confronts her about their unresolved encounter from the previous night, and despite initial resistance, they give in to their desires, sharing a passionate night together. Cassian leaves afterward, stating they are now even. In Chapter 23 of the story delves into the aftermath of a passionate encounter between Cassian and Nesta, which leaves Cassian deeply affected. Despite their intense connection, both try to maintain a facade of indifference. The chapter then shifts to training sessions where Nesta learns combat skills from Cassian and Azriel. Following this, Nesta seeks information about the Dread Trove from Gwyn, a scholar. They discuss the trove's mysterious nature and potential dangers associated with it, leading Nesta to consider her next moves carefully. The chapter ends with Nesta making a pivotal decision after a contemplative moment in the stairwell. In Chapter 24, Cassian meets with Clotho, the High Priestess of the library, regarding Nesta's unauthorized training sessions. Despite Clotho's objections, Cassian defends Nesta's actions, acknowledging her determination to improve her skills. He confronts Nesta in the library where she continues her rigorous training regimen, coaching her on technique and discipline. Nesta challenges Cassian, demonstrating her progress while also provoking the curiosity of observing priestesses. Later, Nesta reflects on her motivations and insecurities, finding solace in a manuscript left by Cassian. Despite setbacks, Nesta discovers a glimmer of hope as a newcomer. Gwyn signs up for training, signaling a potential turning point. In Chapter 25, Nesta and Cassian prepare for Gwyn's first training session. Nesta tries to reassure Gwyn, who arrives nervous but willing to learn. Despite initial hesitation, Gwyn quickly grasps the training concepts and enjoys herself. Later, Nesta encounters Bellius, Emery's drunk cousin, at Emery's shop and confronts him, displaying her assertiveness. Emery and Nesta share a meal, bonding over their pasts and current struggles. Meanwhile, Cassian meets with Eris in the Illyrian steppes, discussing the Dread Trove and its potential implications. Cassian warns Eris about the Trove's dangers, emphasizing secrecy. In Chapter 26, Nesta skips her usual training routine and returns from the library with Cassian, who is visibly upset after a meeting involving Eris. At dinner, they discuss Eris's involvement in finding the Trove. Cassian reveals his frustrations with Eris's manipulations and political games, feeling outmatched. Nesta tries to comfort him, leading to a passionate encounter between them in the dining room. Their intimacy is interrupted by Azriel, who arrives unexpectedly, causing Nesta to leave abruptly. Cassian and Azriel banter briefly before Cassian reflects on Nesta's impact on him. In Chapter 27, Nesta grapples with the aftermath of her intimate encounter with Cassian, but finds distraction in Gwyn's company during training. They discuss the ongoing search for the Dread Trove without success. Later, Nesta asks Cassian to deliver gifts to Emery, hoping to persuade her to join training. Cassian visits Emery's shop and successfully convinces her to consider attending. Meanwhile, Nesta struggles with the idea of scrying as an alternative to library research. During training, she is surprised to find Emery has decided to join them, marking a potential shift in their group dynamics. In Chapter 28, Cassian assists Emery during training, explaining the challenges posed by her clipped wings. Gwyn and Emery bond quickly, discussing books and their backgrounds. Rhysand arrives, impressing Emery with his presence. Nesta and Cassian navigate their dynamic, interrupted by Rhysand's subtle interference and a tense exchange about trust. Emery decides to continue training, inspired by Nesta's gesture of kindness. Rhysand departs with Emery, leaving Cassian and Nesta to reflect on their complicated relationship. In Chapter 29, Nesta struggles with recurring nightmares of her father's death and her failures during the war. She climbs stairs in a moment of reflection, contemplating her isolation from Cassian and Azriel. At the river house, Amren suggests pushing Nesta to find the Dread Trove soon. Cassian defends Nesta's hesitation, but Amren insists on a deadline. Later, during training, 3 priestesses join, one with striking scars, and Nesta attempts scrying to locate the Trove but fails, haunted by her past failures and fears. She later experiences a terrifying encounter with the cauldron's darkness in a nightmare. In Chapter 30, Nesta struggles with a haunting dream of the cauldron, until Cassian's voice pulls her back to reality. She wakes to find him watching over her, triggering conflicting emotions. Later, during exercises with Emery and Gwyn, Nesta shares her recurring nightmares, bonding over shared trauma. Meanwhile, Cassian discusses Feyre's pregnancy with Rhysand, learning the baby will have wings due to Feyre's Illyrian form during conception. Concerns about Feyre's health and the political implications arise, particularly regarding Tamlin and Lucien's involvement. Rhysand grapples with the weight of these revelations, seeking solace in Cassian and Asriel's support amidst rising tensions and fears for the future. In Chapter 31, Nesta finds Cassian returning from a brutal sparring session with Rhys, revealing the baby they expect has wings, posing a potential danger during Feyre's labour. Rhys plans to seek help from other courts, and Nesta prepares to scry for the Mask of the Dread Trove. During the scrying attempt, Nesta's mind becomes unreachable, and she glimpses the location of the mask in a forbidden bog. Despite the danger, she insists they leave immediately, driven by a sense of urgency. Cassian supports her decision, and they prepare to journey to the bog the next day, armed and ready for whatever they might face. In Chapter 32, Rhys, Cassian, Nesta, and Fairy prepare to venture into Urid to find the mask. Cassian and Nesta share a moment of preparation amidst tensions. They arrive at Urid, a desolate bog with oppressive stillness and eerie silence. Cassian warns of ancient creatures like kelpies that once inhabited the bog. Despite the dangers, they search for clues, navigating through dead trees and black water. Cassian, Nesta, and Asriel explore cautiously, wary of the mythical dangers lurking in the bog. As they continue their search, Nesta senses something ominous, but Asriel suddenly disappears, leaving Cassian and Nesta on edge in the mist-covered bog. In Chapter 33, Cassian and Nesta search for Asriel in the mist-shrouded bog of Urid. They discover Autumn Court soldiers attacking Asriel, who is wounded by an ash arrow. Cassian engages in a fierce battle to rescue Asriel, utilising his siphons and skills in combat. Meanwhile, Nesta waits in a tree, anxious and helpless, until she decides to descend and potentially use her magic to help. As she contemplates her next move, she notices a mysterious presence reflected in the water, signalling a new and unforeseen development in their dangerous mission. In Chapter 34, Nesta encounters a malevolent kelpie in the bog, whose appearance terrifies her. Despite trying to escape, the kelpie captures and drags her underwater. Meanwhile, Cassian and Asriel confront and capture two strange soldiers from the Autumn Court, who exhibit unusual behaviour and seem disconnected from their surroundings. They speculate on the soldiers' origins and possible connection to Eris or Beren. Concerned about Nesta's safety, Cassian rushes back to find her but discovers she is missing, leading to panic and desperate calls for her across the eerie landscape of Urid. In Chapter 35, Nesta struggles underwater against the kelpie's assault, using a dagger to injure him and briefly gaining a breath from his unexpected kiss. Despite being disarmed and attacked relentlessly, Nesta senses her hidden power within and finds a glowing golden disc, not realising its true nature until it connects with her hand. In a desperate move, she puts on the mask, a powerful artifact, unleashing its potential and altering the course of her struggle against the kelpie. In Chapter 36, Nesta, empowered by the mask, confronts the kelpie in the depths of the bog. Using the mask's ancient magic, she summons the dead warriors buried there, who rise to attack the kelpie. Despite his struggles, the kelpie is overwhelmed by the relentless assault of the dead, led by Nesta's will. Meanwhile, Cassian and Asriel search desperately for Nesta, fearing the worst until they witness the rising of the dead from the water, guided by Nesta's command. When Nesta emerges victorious, wearing the mask and holding the kelpie's severed head, Cassian and Asriel bow before her in awe and respect. After the intense ordeal, Nesta collapses, shaken but alive as Cassian comforts her. In Chapter 37, Rhys interrogates two violent Autumn Court males found in the bog of Urid, suspected of attacking his court. They appear enchanted, prompting Rhys to seek Helian's aid in breaking the spell. Nesta unexpectedly arrives with the mask used to defeat a kelpie. The group debates the mask's powers, deciding to secure it despite its risks. Plans are made to inform Eris and investigate the Autumn Court's role. Nesta survives a dangerous encounter with a kelpie, revealing her strength and vulnerability. Cassian and Nesta share an intimate moment, overcoming past conflicts. He supports her after the ordeal, leading to a deepened bond and trust, culminating in a passionate connection. In Chapter 38, Nesta faces teasing from Emery and Gwyn about her relationship with Cassian, which she tries to deflect. They press her for details about her whereabouts and activities, hinting at her involvement with the Trove. During training, Cassian challenges Nesta to prove herself with a wooden practice sword, which she accepts, determined to learn. As Cassian instructs her, Nesta begins to grasp the fundamentals of swordplay, driven by a newfound determination and focus. Her training becomes a symbolic battle against her past weaknesses and adversaries. The chapter ends with Nesta embracing the mantra, "Never again," signalling her resolve to become stronger and unyielding in the face of challenges. In Chapter 39, Nesta grapples with a newfound resolve and determination. She channels her inner fire, symbolized by her relentless stairwell descent, vowing never to cower again. Meanwhile, Cassian faces the challenge of integrating Azriel into their training sessions with Nesta, Emery and Gwyn, despite tensions and distractions. Gwyn and Nesta experiment with meditation techniques to manage physical and emotional strain, finding unexpected peace and connection in their shared practice. The chapter highlights their evolving strengths, both individually and as a team, amidst ongoing physical and emotional challenges, setting the stage for deeper character development and interpersonal dynamics. In Chapter 40, Valaris is gripped by autumnal rain, setting a cold and misty atmosphere. Cassian takes Nesta to a centuries-old blacksmith shop on the outskirts of Valaris to learn about blade craftsmanship. Despite initial reluctance from the blacksmith, Nesta insists on trying her hand at forging, gradually gaining proficiency and surprising even Cassian with her dedication. Back in Valaris, Nesta, Emery and Gwyn continue their intense training regimen, with Nesta channeling her inner turmoil and aggression into physical exertion. Lucien observes Nesta's training, noting her intense focus and power, leaving Cassian both impressed and unsettled by her newfound strength. In Chapter 41, High Lord Helion arrives at the hewn city on a Pegasus, despite Rhys banning his preferred chariot entry. He inspects enchanted soldiers and identifies an unconventional influence on them, not a typical spell. The group discusses Queen Briallin's possession of the crown and her motivations. Helion examines the mask and agrees to strengthen its wards against Briallin. Nesta joins the discussion, displaying skepticism toward Helion's formalities. They decide to keep the mask hidden and plan their next moves cautiously, including confronting Eris and monitoring Briallin's activities. Amidst strategic planning, Cassian and Nesta navigate their growing closeness, sharing intimate moments while grappling with their desires. In Chapter 42 revolves around Cassian's mourning after a passionate night with Nesta, grappling with their newfound intimacy. Summoned to Rhys's office, they discover 3 magically imbued swords gifted by a panicked blacksmith. Nesta unknowingly imbued them with her power during a visit. The swords hold potential as powerful artifacts akin to the Dread Trove, capable of altering wars. Rhys and Amryn debate their implications, fearing Nesta's uncontrollable potential. They decide to keep Nesta unaware to prevent further creations. The chapter ends with tension over Rhys's reluctance to accept kingship, despite the sword's potential to unite Prythian against rising threats. In Chapter 43, Nesta and Cassian wait in the Springcourt forest for Eris. Nesta notices Cassian's discomfort due to allergies but keeps it to herself. Eris eventually appears, and Cassian informs him that most of his enchanted soldiers are dead, with only 2 survivors. Tensions rise as Eris accuses them of massacring his soldiers, and Nesta confronts Eris about his involvement. Suddenly, Tamlin appears, threatening them but eventually retreating. Later, Nesta reflects on the events, unable to sleep, and feels a sense of belonging in the Night Court library. In Chapter 44, Nesta and her friends continue rigorous training under Cassian's guidance, learning sword techniques and discussing Valkyrie history. Cassian reveals his personal connection to the Valkyries, having fought alongside them in battles. He challenges the women to master Illyrian sword maneuvers while suggesting they incorporate Valkyrie techniques, which sparks intrigue. Later, at dinner with Feyre and others, Cassian shares more about the Valkyries, including Nesta's hidden talents in dance and her past exploits using her skills to outshine rivals. The conversation reveals deeper layers of Nesta's character and her potential beyond combat, hinting at her desire for freedom and expression through music and dance. In Chapter 45, Cassian continues training Nesta, Gwyn, and Emery in rigorous Valkyrie techniques, pushing them to their limits. During a break, Cassian playfully asks Nesta about naming a sword, leading to a revelation. Nesta learns that the blades she created at the blacksmiths during winter solstice carry immense magical power, equivalent to ancient dread troves. Shocked and hurt, Nesta confronts Cassian about why he and the inner circle kept this from her, discovering that Rhys and Amren initially opposed telling her. Feeling betrayed and furious, Nesta withdraws emotionally, leaving the training session abruptly and retreating to her room in Valaris, where she unleashes her pent-up anger and hurt. In Chapter 46, consumed by fury, Nesta confronts Amren and Varian in their loft, furious over the inner circle's decision not to tell her about the true nature of her newly acquired magical powers. Amren defends her vote against Nesta, citing concerns over Nesta's ability to handle such power responsibly. Their argument escalates until Fair interrupts, pleading for peace but unable to quell Nesta's rage. Nesta reveals a devastating secret about Fair's pregnancy, accusing the inner circle of keeping her in the dark. Fair is shattered by the revelation, and Cassian, learning of the chaos, rushes to contain the situation, but Rhys's wrath threatens dire consequences for Nesta. In Chapter 47, Cassian intercepts Nesta as she flees toward a tavern, carrying her away from the city to prevent further conflict with Rhysand. They fly for hours into the sleeping mountains, where Cassian sets up camp despite his evident anger. Nesta, consumed by guilt over her actions, withdraws into silence and solitude, refusing to engage with Cassian. Meanwhile, Fair contacts Cassian via mindspeak, expressing anger at the situation but also understanding Nesta's motivations. She urges Cassian to return, but he decides to stay in the wilderness with Nesta, planning a hiking trip as a form of penance and reflection. Despite tensions, Fair insists they take care of each other. In Chapter 48, Cassian wakes Nesta at dawn and forces her to eat before embarking on a grueling hike through the mountains. He assigns her to carry a heavy pack, showing little sympathy for her discomfort or exhaustion. They hike steadily uphill, Cassian maintaining a cold distance as Nesta struggles with the physical demands. At a river stop for lunch, Cassian instructs her curtly, offering minimal kindness despite her obvious fatigue and emotional turmoil. As they continue their journey, Cassian reflects on the mountain's healing history and wonders if bringing Nesta here will help her heal. Nesta remains silent and introspective, grappling with her self-loathing and the weight of her actions. In Chapter 49, Cassian and Nesta continue their arduous journey through the mountains, where Cassian determines they will camp for the night after a strenuous day of hiking. Nesta collapses in exhaustion upon reaching the campsite, barely able to move or speak. Cassian remains distant and cold towards her, focused on practical tasks. As night falls, Nesta struggles with her thoughts and sleeps fitfully. The next day, despite her physical and emotional fatigue, they press on through the rugged terrain. Nesta's condition worsens due to dehydration, culminating in her fainting on the trail. Cassian rushes to her aid, realizing she hasn't been drinking enough water. He carries her to a new campsite where she wakes briefly to find food and Cassian nearby, before slipping into a restless sleep again. In Chapter 50, Nesta confronts her deep guilt and sorrow by the mountain lake, allowing herself to sob uncontrollably over past mistakes and losses. Cassian comforts her without physical touch initially, but eventually holds her as she pours out her regrets and self-loathing. He shares his own struggles and offers support, urging her to believe in her capacity for healing and self-forgiveness. As dawn breaks, they remain by the lake, where Cassian guides Nesta to reclaim her strength through sword practice, symbolizing a new resolve and determination to move forward despite her pain. In Chapter 51, Nesta returns from a week-long absence with Cassian, having learned swordplay. In a training session, Gwyn introduces a test involving slicing a ribbon as a sign of readiness for battle. Emery fails, but Cassian effortlessly succeeds. Later, Nesta and Cassian engage in passionate intimacy, avoiding emotional connection afterward. Nesta struggles with guilt and self-punishment, focusing on training and avoiding Fair. She confides in Gwyn about her past struggles and finds solace in attending Gwyn's evening services for music. Their bond deepens as Gwyn empathizes with Nesta's turmoil. In Chapter 52, Nesta attends a sunset service in a cavern filled with hooded priestesses. Gwyn unexpectedly appears among them, signalling Nesta with a smile. The priestesses sing ancient, mesmerizing songs that transport Nesta into a trance-like state. She experiences vivid visions guided by the music, ultimately discovering a mystical chamber beneath the mountain linked to the priestess's song. Nesta believes the harp, a powerful artifact, lies within this chamber. She shares her discovery with Cassian and Rhys, who prepare to investigate its potential implications at the prison, guarded by a shield created by Rhys. In Chapter 53, Nesta and Cassian venture into the prison at Rhys's behest to retrieve the harp, protected by ancient wards and dangerous inmates. Nesta uses her newfound powers to navigate the treacherous paths, finally locating the harp in a hidden chamber. Upon touching it, she experiences a disturbing vision and a psychic connection with Betrayal, a malevolent queen. They narrowly escape as Lanthis, a dangerous prisoner, is released unexpectedly. Cassian protects Nesta as they flee, reaffirming their bond amidst the perilous surroundings. The chapter ends with a tense confrontation as they encounter the open cell of Lanthis. In Chapter 54, Cassian faces the imminent threat of Lanthis as they stand in the open cell. Knowing his death is near, Cassian focuses on protecting Nesta, urging her to escape. Lanthis taunts them with his immortality and reveals the harp's influence, manipulating Nesta's power. As Cassian fights, Nesta flees, using the harp to teleport away. She finds herself confronting Autumn Court soldiers sent by Betrayal. Nesta uses ataraxia, a blade of immense power, to fend them off and confront Lanthis. With Cassian's help, they defeat Lanthis, though Cassian is gravely injured. Nesta uses the harp to escape to safety in Valaris, seeking help from Rhysand for Cassian's wounds. In Chapter 55, Nesta recovers from injuries sustained in a confrontation and faces off with Rhysand and Cassian over her recovery. The harp, a powerful artifact, is discussed for its potential dangers in enemy hands. Nesta reveals visions linked to the harp, hinting at its sinister history. The Wild Hunt, a mythical force, is explored, revealing ancient Fae history. Plans are made to secure alliances and deal with the looming threat posed by Betrayal. Nesta confronts her past and familial dynamics in a dilapidated cottage. Cassian supports her emotionally through the visit, highlighting their growing bond. In Chapter 56, a month passes with winter descending on Valaris. Nesta continues rigorous training with the Valkyries despite the cold. Her physical condition improves, and she engages in a passionate but complicated relationship with Cassian. Meanwhile, she learns dances for an upcoming ball with Morrigan's help. Gwyn surprises Nesta and Emery with personalised chapters in a book about the Valkyries. Cassian's absence due to outpost duties triggers introspection for Nesta, who confronts her fears and finds solace in the House of Wind. She embraces personal growth and prepares for winter solstice with newfound resolve. In Chapter 57, Cassian, usually fond of winter solstice, dreads this year's festivities due to Nesta's imminent dance with Eris at the Court of Nightmares. The court is adorned for the celebration, awaiting Fair and Rhysand's arrival, with Fair revealing her pregnancy. Nesta, in a stunning black gown and tiara, captivates the court with her dance skills during multiple waltzes with Eris, displaying unmatched grace and power. Despite tensions, the event concludes peacefully, setting the stage for future political maneuvers and revealing deeper alliances and tensions within the court. In Chapter 58, Nesta attends Fair's birthday party reluctantly, feeling out of place among the inner circle. Cassian convinces her to join, where she interacts awkwardly with Elaine and Lucien. Despite tension with Amren and avoiding Azriel, Nesta engages in conversation with others. During gift-giving, Cassian gives Nesta a rare music orb, which overwhelms her with emotion. Later, in private, Nesta confronts Cassian about her conflicted feelings and admits her fear of deserving happiness. Cassian reassures her, and they reconcile their feelings physically, marking a significant turning point in their relationship. In Chapter 59, Nesta wakes up in Cassian's arms, enjoying a moment of intimacy before Cassian rushes off to an annual snowball fight tradition with Rhys and Azriel. 3 days pass without word from Cassian, leaving Nesta longing for him intensely. She seeks solace in her friends Emery and Gwyn, spending time together in the House of Wind's library, where they enjoy magical indulgences and bond over shared experiences and personal histories. They end the evening making bracelets with wishes for each other, reinforcing their bond as a chosen family. In Chapter 60, Cassian returns after 5 days to find Nesta, Emery, and Gwyn training intensely together. They engage in a ritual where Gwyn cuts a ribbon, symbolizing their unity and resilience. Later, Cassian introduces a challenging obstacle course, testing the Valkyries' teamwork and endurance. Despite initial setbacks, Gwyn, Emery, and Nesta persevere, determined to prove themselves. They eventually conquer the course, earning recognition from Cassian and Azriel. The chapter highlights their evolving strength as a unit and individual growth, culminating in a significant step towards acceptance and respect within the Illyrian community, despite ongoing challenges and opposition. In Chapter 61, Nesta challenges herself to conquer the final test of descending the house's stairs, achieving a newfound clarity and strength. She reflects on her evolving relationships with Cassian and her friends, alternating between moments of lovemaking and intense passion. After completing her challenge, Nesta joins a starfall party at the house, where she experiences overwhelming beauty and gratitude, moved to tears by the stars and the joy around her. She reconciles with Amren, acknowledging her past mistakes and embracing the changes within herself. Amren reveals that Nesta's presence has transformed the house, symbolizing her growth and acceptance within the Night Court community. In Chapter 62, spring arrives in Valaris with a sense of unease. Nesta and Cassian await news from Briellin amidst warnings of impending conflict. A red star passes overhead, seen as an ill omen. Eris summons Nesta and Cassian to discuss his father's suspicious activities. Eris questions them about the trove, revealing tensions over its power. Cassian confronts Eris with confidence, asserting their plans while hiding their true intentions. After a tense exchange, Nesta and Cassian fly back to Valaris, where they discuss their relationship and the complexities of their bond. Later that night, Nesta is attacked in her home, leading to a sudden and ominous disappearance. In Chapter 63, Cassian abides by Nesta's bargain and spends a restless night at the House of Wind. Concerned about Nesta, he seeks Rhys at dawn, learning that she, Gwyn, and Emery are missing from Emery's shop. Cassian discovers signs of a struggle and fears they have been abducted to participate in the blood rite, a dangerous Illyrian tradition. The scent of male blood and sleeping ointment confirms his worst fears. With Rhys, Cassian prepares to confront the dire consequences of their disappearance, knowing they face a perilous trial beyond their control. In Chapter 64, Nesta awakens disoriented in a forest clearing, amidst sleeping Illyrian warriors, bound by the blood rite's magic. She realizes her powers are nullified and must act quickly to find Emery and Gwyn before they awaken defenseless. Spotting a knife in a nearby tree, against the E-Rite's rules, she races to claim it before a male warrior can. They struggle, tumbling down a hillside where Nesta fatally stabs him in self-defense. After dressing in the male's clothes for warmth and protection, she sets out to locate her friends amid the dangerous surroundings, determined to reunite and survive the deadly trial ahead. In Chapter 65, Nesta awakens alone among sleeping Illyrian warriors, realizing Emery and Gwyn are not nearby. Using a magical charm bracelet, she determines Emery is to the south and heads north toward Ramiel, hoping to find Gwyn along the way. Despite the rite suppressing magic, the charm continues to guide her, reinforcing her determination to survive and rescue her friends. Meanwhile, Cassian and Azriel search for Eris in Briellin's stronghold, grappling with their inability to intervene directly in the rite due to strict laws. Cassian's thoughts remain fixated on Nesta's safety as they scour the landscape, desperate for any sign of their missing companions. In Chapter 66, Nesta encounters an Illyrian warrior who threatens her and reveals Emery's recent presence. Nesta incapacitates him and continues her search for Emery, finding her unconscious near a dangerous river. Nesta rescues Emery, struggles to keep her warm, and they take shelter in a cave where they meet Balthazar, an Illyrian who offers temporary refuge. They survive a harrowing night besieged by creatures. In the morning, Nesta scavenges for supplies amidst the aftermath of a massacre, finding clothing and provisions. Emery wakes, and they set off towards Gwyn's location, indicated by magical charms. In Chapter 67, Emery recounts being chased by males from the river, jumping into a river to survive. Nesta and Emery head southward cautiously, encountering solo warriors and packs, but find no sign of Gwyn. They seek shelter in a cave where Emery takes the first watch and Nesta sleeps fitfully. They wake to find blood and large animal tracks outside. They sense a distant fire and cautiously approach, suspecting it might be Gwyn. As they near, they overhear male laughter and cautiously scout the area. Emery is suddenly captured, leaving Nesta alone to plan their next move. In Chapter 68, Nesta, Emery, and Gwyn navigate through snowy terrain, pursued by Illyrian soldiers. They reach a precarious bridge where Gwyn is injured by an arrow. Nesta shoots an arrow with a rope attached to save Gwyn, but they are pursued by more enemies. They manage to cut the bridge and escape, continuing their journey towards Ramiel, the mountain peak. Meanwhile, Cassian and Azriel observe movements from Eris, suspecting betrayal. The trio reaches the base of Ramiel, facing a daunting climb. Gwyn reveals a traumatic past but insists on climbing the mountain despite their weakened state. In Chapter 69, Eris and his caravan travel eastward for 3 days at a relaxed pace. Cassian and Azriel observe from afar, noting Brialin's presence but no sign of the crown. The blood rite approaches, with Cassian anxious about Nesta. Meanwhile, Nesta, Gwyn, and Emery continue their grueling ascent up the mountain, facing physical and mental challenges. They struggle onward despite injuries, racing against time and pursuers. Back at the lake, Eris confronts Cassian and Azriel under Brialin's coercion, leading to a tense standoff. Nesta reaches the pass of Inalius, where she makes a fateful decision to protect her friends as dawn approaches. In Chapter 70, Bellius sends his warriors to confront Nesta at the bottleneck, aiming to wear her down. Nesta stands firm, determined to protect her friends. She faces the attackers with calm resolve, using her shield and skills to fend off multiple opponents. Nesta reflects on her purpose and the power of ataraxia, her magic sword named for inner peace. She fights relentlessly, holding the line against the Illyrians, driven by love and a deep sense of duty. Nesta's unwavering focus and deadly precision keep her friends safe, as she proves her worthiness with every strike and defense. In Chapter 71, atop the lake, Koschei taunts Cassian and Azriel, revealing Brialin's true identity as a queen wearing the crown. Brialin captures Cassian with the crown's power, and Koschei commands them to be winnowed away. Meanwhile, Nesta fights fiercely at the pass of Inalius, defeating Illyrian warriors sent by Bellius. Exhausted but determined, Nesta faces Bellius, who mocks her and reveals the history of the sacred spot. Gwyn and Emery successfully reach the summit, triggering a magical response that enrages Bellius. As snow begins to fall, signalling the mountain's response, Bellius attacks Nesta in a final confrontation. In Chapter 72, Emery and Gwyn reach the summit, achieving victory in the breaking. Meanwhile, Nesta faces Bellius in a brutal battle at the pass of Inalius during a raging storm. Exhausted and wounded, Nesta fights defensively against Bellius's relentless attacks. The storm intensifies, hindering her movements. Bellius disarms Nesta and corners her, intending to kill her with his bare hands. Despite her injuries, Nesta summons the will to stand and faces Bellius defiantly. She blocks his punches and strikes back, breaking his nose. With determination fueled by thoughts of her mate, she vows to survive the deadly confrontation. In Chapter 73, in the aftermath of her intense battle with Bellius, Nesta is exhausted and on the brink of defeat. Bellius prepares to kill her with a knife, but before he can, Cassian appears and fatally wounds him. As Nesta collapses, Cassian helps her up, offering support and comfort. However, Cassian suddenly acts erratically, his demeanour changing unnaturally as he grips Nesta forcefully. He seems controlled by an unseen force, identified as Brialin, the ancient queen with the crown, who asserts her dominance over Cassian. Nesta is caught in a dire situation, realising Cassian is no longer himself and is under Brialin's influence. In Chapter 74, Nesta confronts Brialin, who reveals her manipulative plans to wear down Nesta and capture the trove. Using the crown's power, Brialin controls Cassian, forcing him to threaten Nesta with a knife. Despite Cassian's struggle against the crown's influence, Brialin orders him to kill Nesta to obtain the trove's secrets. Cassian, in an act of defiance and love, turns the knife on himself instead. As the sun rises, Nesta unleashes her full magical power, obliterating Breelin and erasing her from existence. Only the crown remains amidst the aftermath of Nesta's unleashed fury and magic. In Chapter 75, Cassian lies motionless on the ground as Nesta rushes to him in tears, finding him unharmed with the knife untouched beneath him. They share a tender moment where Cassian acknowledges Nesta's role in defeating Breelin. Amidst their embrace, Mor and Asriel arrive, revealing Eris is safe and the maid dagger recovered. However, Mor interrupts with urgent news about Feia, their faces grim, setting a new tone of concern and urgency, despite the joyous reunion between Nesta and Cassian. In Chapter 76, Nesta and the others arrive at the river house to find Feia in dire condition, bleeding heavily with complications during childbirth. Maja explains the risks of attempting a life-saving incision. Despite the dangers, Feia insists on proceeding to save her unborn child. As the situation deteriorates, Rhys tries to alleviate Feia's pain mentally, while Cassian and Asriel support him. Tragically, Feia succumbs to her injuries, leaving Rhys devastated. In a moment of desperation and grief, Nesta dons the mask, places the crown on her head, and wields the harp, all three powerful artifacts. She approaches Feia's bedside with an ominous intent, ready to pluck the final string of the harp. In Chapter 77, Nesta uses the harp's 26th string to halt time, just as Feia passes away during childbirth. She then invokes the power of the mask, crown, and harp together, entering a state where she bargains with the cauldron to save Feia, Rhysand, and their newborn son. With a powerful plea, Nesta sacrifices her own newfound abilities in exchange for the knowledge to heal them. Light surges through her, healing Feia and the baby, transforming the lifeless child into a healthy, full-term boy. Overwhelmed with relief, Feia and Rhys embrace their son while expressing their love and gratitude to Nesta, who has sacrificed everything to save them. In Chapter 78, Gwyn and Emery confront Nesta, initially angered but eventually forgiving her for her actions during the rite. Nesta explains that they were healed and brought to safety by the Trove's power, which she summoned despite Hellion's protections. The conversation turns to their future and the potential repercussions for Emery regarding Bellius's death. Later, Nesta joins Feia, Rhys, and their newborn son Nyx, named for his starlit eyes and tiny wings. Cassian shares a moment with Nesta outside, where she reveals she sacrificed her powers to save them, but retained a bit due to an unseen force. They discuss changes she made and their future together, ending with a tender moment of love and commitment. In Chapter 79, 2 days after Nyx's birth, Cassian visits Eris in the hewn city. Eris is recovering in a suite and appears nonchalant despite recent traumatic events. Cassian questions Eris about what he disclosed to Beron. Learning Eris manipulated the truth to protect his allies. They discuss Eris's complex relationship with his father and his motivations. Particularly his actions towards Mor. Cassian challenges Eris to explain his conflicting actions and motives, hinting at deeper personal struggles. Despite their strained conversation, Cassian acknowledges Eris's loyalty amidst political tensions and returns home to Valaris, reflecting on Nesta and their future together. In Chapter 80, spring blossoms in Valaris as Feia and Nyx recover, enjoying walks with protective companions. Nesta continues rigorous training despite her recent achievements. Plans for her mating ceremony with Cassian are underway despite her preference for simplicity. The House of Wind is gifted to Nesta and Cassian by Rhys. Nesta visits her father's grave with Feia and Elaine, reflecting on her past and seeking forgiveness. She leaves a token of gratitude, feeling a renewed sense of purpose and love for her family and Cassian, watches over her from above, and they share a tender moment before joining Feia and Elaine.